All right, get ready because today we're going to be looking at something pretty unusual. An Akathist to Cornelius Codreanu.
Mm.
Now, you're probably familiar with Akathists.
Yes.
These are those beautiful hymns in the Eastern Orthodox Church.
Mm.
And typically they're used to praise Jesus, Mary, or a recognized saint.
Of course.
But Codreanu.
He's a little different.
Yeah, he is a different story.
He is. Codreanu was a prominent Romanian political figure back in the early 20th century.
Okay.
He's known for founding the Legion of the Archangel Michael.
Yes.
Which was a movement with very strong religious and nationalistic undertones.
Right.
And Codreanu himself remains a very controversial figure.
Yeah, so that's what makes this so fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that he isn't a formally canonized saint.
Right.
So it kind of raises the question immediately of why would someone create an Akathist for him?
Yeah.
Like, that's what piques your curiosity right from the start, especially when you consider that it was written by someone described as a spiritual son of a very respected Romanian Orthodox monk.
Right.
And then later, it was translated into English by a fellow named Caleb.
Okay.
So clearly, someone felt that this text was really important.
Yes.
Important enough to share with a wider audience.
For sure.
And, what makes it even more intriguing, I think, is that the Akathist itself and some of the commentary that goes along with it actually goes into some pretty surprising territory.
It does.
There are these claims about Codreanu's body remaining incorrupt after death.
Yes.
There are these discussions about the reasons for his lasting appeal, and even comparisons to other really divisive figures throughout history.
Yes, this deep dive is going to be pretty interesting.
I think so. So today, our mission is to kind of explore what this Akathist reveals, right?
Right here.
About Codreanu himself, about his followers, and about this kind of enduring power of certain beliefs, right?
Yes.
Even when they're wrapped in controversy.
Absolutely.
So to start off, let's actually just look at the Akathist itself.
Okay.
Structurally, it follows that traditional form, right?
It does, yeah.
With hymns and stanzas that are praising Codreanu's virtues and actions.
Right. And those praises actually give us a lot of insight into how the author of this Akathist viewed Codreanu, for example. He compares Codreanu to biblical figures, like the centurion Cornelius, who was known for his strong faith and conversion to Christianity.
Yeah.
So already you can see they're trying to emphasize that Codreanu had this deep and unwavering faith.
So they're using that kind of biblical comparison to kind of bolster that image.
Right.
And it doesn't stop there.
It doesn't.
It also goes into Codreanu's political activities. Specifically his opposition to communism.
Yes.
And what the author perceived as threats to Christianity in Romania at the time.
What's really fascinating here is they're not just praising his stance.
Right.
They're going beyond that. They're actually framing his political actions as being divinely inspired and protected.
So like he's an instrument of God almost.
Right. They're elevating him from just a devout politician to something more, someone who is acting on behalf of God.
Yeah, like a warrior saint. Also.
Yeah, exactly. Fighting a spiritual battle against the forces of evil.
And speaking of spiritual battles, it's not just Codreanu himself.
No, it's not.
That they're focusing on.
Yeah.
It's the entire legionary movement.
Yes. The Akathist really emphasizes the spiritual dimension of the entire movement.
Okay.
It presents it as a school for Christian living, a force for moral and national renewal in Romania.
And now along with the Akathist, right?
Yeah,
we have Caleb, the translator, who's adding in his own commentary as well.
Right. So he wanted to shed light on the prison saints of Romania. Okay.
These are individuals who were persecuted for their faith under communist rule. And this Akathist dedicated to Codreanu was one that he was asked to translate.
Interesting.
And he acknowledges the potential for controversy surrounding Codreanu.
Yeah, because it's there.
Oh, it's definitely there.
Yeah.
And he even tries to soften some of the language.
Okay.
Particularly when it comes to references to Jewish people. And what I find interesting is he actually explains his reasoning for the choices he makes in the translation.
So that's kind of a glimpse into the translator's mind a little bit.
It is. It's a delicate balancing act. Yeah. For sure.
And he even includes a disclaimer, right?
He does, yeah.
Stating that the Akathist isn't necessarily endorsing all of Codreanu's political activities. It's really focused on the spiritual aspects of the legionary movement.
Exactly. So he's trying to draw a distinction between Codreanu, the politician, and Codreanu, the spiritual figure. Right, because those are two very different things, potentially.
They certainly are.
Okay, so then we get to this really fascinating part where they talk about Codreanu's incorruptibility after death. They actually describe the exhumation of his body in 1940.
Right.
And they really emphasize that it was found whole and undecomposed.
Yes.
Even though the burial conditions were really harsh.
Which is interesting because in the Orthodox tradition, incorruptibility of a body is often seen as a sign of divine favor.
Right.
A potential indication of sainthood.
Yeah, it's almost like God himself is saying this person was special.
Right, set apart.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're emphasizing this in the Akathist and the commentary around it
makes you wonder.
It does.
What are they trying to do here?
Yeah, are they building a case for Codreanu's sainthood?
Even indirectly.
Even indirectly, yeah.
Okay, now speaking of intentions, the commentary also mentions this rather controversial figure named Matthew Heimbach, who is an American white nationalist, who initially praised Codreanu.
No.
But later, he actually renounced far-right ideology.
Interesting.
And I think that this association really hasn't done Codreanu any favors.
Not all.
Especially for people who aren't really familiar with his story.
Right, because now they just lump him in
exactly.
with these other figures.
And the Akathist tries to address this.
Right. They do. They argue that sainthood should be judged based on an individual's spiritual qualities, not their political affiliations.
So they're trying to separate?
Right. They're saying, look at the spiritual side. Don't get caught up in the political stuff.
Okay, so that's an interesting argument.
It is. It's thought-provoking.
Yeah.
For sure.
It really kind of makes you wonder, can you truly separate a person's spiritual life from their actions in the political realm?
Yeah, and especially when those actions...
Especially when they've had such a big impact.
Exactly. So that's something we're going to be thinking about as we go through this Akathist.
Okay, so before we move on, though, there's one more little detail I think is worth mentioning.
Oh, what's that?
From the commentary.
Okay.
Caleb actually mentions that the Akathist might have been written by a brother Gabriel from the Petrivoda monastery. And this brother Gabriel actually claimed that he received a blessing from a very prominent elder in the Romanian Orthodox Church, Elder Justin Parvu.
Interesting.
To create this Akathist for Codreanu.
So this wasn't just some random act of devotion.
Right, exactly. It sounds like maybe there was a little more organization.
Yeah, more concerted effort.
Yeah, within certain circles to promote Codreanu's veneration.
Yeah, this is getting interesting.
This just got a whole lot more interesting.
For sure.
It raises even more questions.
Definitely.
About the motivation behind the Akathist and its potential impact on how Codreanu is remembered.
It makes you think.
It really does.
About who is behind all of this.
Yeah. And what their goals might be.
Exactly.
So what other surprises are in store?
I don't know.
What does this all tell us about Codreanu's appeal?
Who knows? We'll have to keep reading.
We'll find out.
And find out.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive.
Right, where we'll explore these questions. And more.
And more.
We'll see what else we can dig up about this fascinating Akathist.
See you next time.
All right, see you then.
So we were talking about these hints, right?
Yeah.
That maybe there was a little bit more of an organized effort to venerate Codreanu.
Yeah, the mention of Brother Gabriel and Elder Justin Parvu really suggests that this Akathist, might be more than just some isolated, expression of devotion from one person.
Right.
It kind of hints at a network of individuals.
Yeah, within the church.
Yeah, within the Romanian Orthodox Church, right?
Yeah.
Who saw something special in Codreanu. Right. Something worthy of praise and, even emulation.
And that brings us to another point that we've touched on.
Yeah.
Which is that the Akathist really emphasizes Codreanu's appeal.
Yes.
Not just as a devout Christian, but as a leader.
As a leader, exactly.
Right.
It's like they're presenting him as a model for how to navigate a world that seems to be hostile to traditional values.
Yeah, and that's where the language gets really interesting.
Yes.
Right. Because they're constantly portraying Codreanu as someone who stood up for his beliefs, even in the face of persecution.
Persecution and opposition.
Right.
They're painting him as this fearless warrior.
Right. Almost like a soldier for Christ.
Exactly. Someone who's battling against these threats to both faith and nation.
And, that kind of imagery, right?
Yeah.
That taps into a very powerful narrative.
It does, especially for people who feel like their own values are under attack.
Right, exactly. Or that their cultural identity is being eroded.
Or that the world is changing too fast.
Right, and they're losing their place in it.
Exactly. They feel like they're losing their grip on things.
Yeah, it's like they need someone to kind of, point the way.
To show them the way. And Codreanu, as they're presenting him, kind of fits that mold.
He's like that modern-day saint.
Right. Someone who embodies these ideals of strength and conviction and unwavering faith.
And they need that in this world, right?
Especially in a world that seems to be losing its moral compass.
That seems to be kind of spinning out of control.
Exactly.
Right, and that narrative.
It's powerful.
It is powerful.
And it's really compelling.
Especially in times of uncertainty, I think.
Yeah, uncertainty, rapid societal change.
Right.
People want something to hold on to.
They want that certainty.
They want that stability, yeah. And they look for figures who represent that.
Right. Who represent tradition.
Tradition, a defense of a simpler way of life.
Right. Okay, so we've got this powerful narrative of a devout leader, this kind of warrior for Christ, right?
Right.
But then there's this other layer.
Okay.
This claim that Codreanu's body was found incorrupt after death.
Yes, that's a pretty significant detail.
Right.
Especially in the context of Orthodox beliefs about sainthood.
It's almost like a physical manifestation.
It is. It's a tangible sign of divine favor. You know, it's like God is saying, this person was special, set apart.
And they actually include an account, right?
They do, from a legionary poet named Vasile Postuka, who was actually present at the exhumation in 1940.
Okay.
And he describes Codreanu's body in really vivid detail.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He emphasizes that it was whole, undecomposed, while other bodies that were buried with him were clearly showing signs of decay.
So they were decomposed.
They were.
But Codreanu wasn't.
Not at all. He even says that Codreanu's chest was bulging.
Oh, wow.
As if he wanted to get out of his coat. And that his skin still had a healthy color.
That's crazy.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
And they explicitly link this observation to sainthood.
Oh, really?
They do. They say that Codreanu's incorruptibility can well attest to his holiness.
So they're using this physical evidence as proof.
As proof, as evidence.
Of his spiritual purity.
Right. And it's important to remember, right, that claims of incorruptibility, while they're significant within the Orthodox tradition, they need to be approached with some critical analysis.
Right, because there could be other explanations.
There could be, yeah.
Right.
Scientific explanations.
Yeah, like burial conditions or even just...
embalming practices.
Yeah, the way people's bodies decompose.
Exactly. There's natural variations.
Right.
So we can't just take it at face value.
Right. But even if there is some other explanation, the fact that they're making this claim and they're emphasizing it so much...
it says something.
That tells us something, right? It shows how much they're trying to connect this belief in his incorruptibility to the broader narrative of sainthood.
Exactly, even if it's not official sainthood.
Even if it's unofficial, right.
Unofficial, right.
Yeah.
But they're trying to build that case.
They're building that case.
They're planting that seed.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. It is. The more you say it, the more people believe it.
The more it becomes true in their minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It solidifies his image as a saintly figure.
Now, this raises a question.
Yeah.
Could this belief... fueled by these accounts, like Postuka's, could it contribute to an actual effort to venerate him?
To venerate him officially?
Yeah, more formally in the future.
It's possible. We've seen it before.
Right, with other figures.
Right, popular movements pushing for recognition.
Right, even without the church's approval.
Exactly, and this Akathist, with its glowing portrayal of Codreanu and the claims of incorruptibility, it could be seen as groundwork.
It's like they're planting a seed.
It is. They're planting a seed.
And they're waiting for the right condition.
Right, for it to sprout.
Maybe a resurgence of nationalism.
Yeah, or a perceived threat to Orthodox values.
Or even just a desire for...
a desire for strong leadership.
Strong leadership.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, someone who embodies those values.
And then this Akathist is just there.
Waiting.
Right.
Ready to go.
It's ready to provide the theological...
the evidence, the basis.
Yeah, the basis for that veneration.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It's a great example of how narratives are crafted and shaped.
And used to shape perceptions.
Right. So while this might seem like just some niche religious text,
it
gives us this window into these broader themes.
Absolutely.
Right.
It does.
Of belief, of historical memory.
Yeah, and how narratives are constructed.
Exactly.
And how they evolve over time.
And it reminds us that we need to be really critical. Absolutely.
How the information that we come across.
Don't just take things at face value.
Right. We need to question those narratives.
Question the sources.
Yeah.
Think about the motivations.
Think about the motivations of the people who are promoting them.
Exactly.
Okay. So speaking of sources and motivations.
Yes.
Let's talk about Caleb for a second.
Okay. The translator?
The translator, right.
Yeah.
And the choices he made in bringing this Akathist to an English-speaking audience.
It's a tough job.
It is a tough job.
Because he's walking this tightrope, trying to stay true to the original text, but also being aware of the potential for misinterpretations.
Right, exactly.
Or even misuse.
Yeah, and he's very upfront about the fact that he undertook this translation at the request of a Romanian Orthodox Christian who wanted to spread awareness of what they call the prison saints.
The prison saints of Romania?
Of Romania.
Yeah, individuals who were persecuted.
And often imprisoned for their faith.
Under the communist regime.
Under the communist regime.
Right, so right away, that tells us something.
It tells us that we're dealing with a particular perspective here.
Right.
They want to shine a light on these figures who might not be well known.
Right, outside of certain circles.
Exactly.
It's like he's saying, these are our heroes.
These are our martyrs.
Yeah.
Their stories deserve to be told.
And Caleb seems to be really wrestling.
He does.
With the complexities of Codreanu's legacy, right?
Yeah, he acknowledges that Codreanu was involved in politics.
Right.
But he emphasizes that the Akathist is focused on the spiritual side of things.
Right, like the spiritual aspect of the legionary movement.
A spiritual aspect, exactly.
Like he's trying to draw that distinction.
He is. He's saying, yes, he was a political figure, but that's not what we're celebrating here.
Right.
We're focused on his spiritual qualities.
His devotion to Christ.
His devotion to Christ.
Okay.
And he even alters certain phrases in the translation.
Really?
Yeah, to kind of eliminate confusion about what Codreanu is being praised for.
Okay.
So he downplays the political dimensions and highlights the spiritual virtues.
So for
example, there's a line that originally said, rejoice that the Romanians followed thee more vigorously. He changes that to, rejoice that the Romanians followed thee to Christ.
So he's shifting the focus.
Exactly.
Right, from political influence to spiritual guidance.
Exactly. He's making Codreanu a spiritual leader.
Right. Someone who's leading people to Christ.
That's the emphasis.
Okay, so he's really trying to, navigate these sensitive areas.
He is. He's walking a tightrope. Yeah. For sure.
He's trying to make it accessible to a wider audience.
While also staying true to the original text.
Right, without endorsing or condemning Codreanu's political actions.
It's a tough balance.
It's a tough balance, and it makes you wonder, how much can a translator, through their choices, shape the way a text is received?
Absolutely.
It's not a neutral act.
It's not. They're making decisions about what words to use.
Yeah, what to emphasize.
To emphasize, what to downplay.
Exactly.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is a lot of responsibility.
So, for sure.
And that brings us to maybe Caleb's most significant change.
Oh, okay.
He actually reveals that he altered some references to Jewish people.
Interesting.
In the Akathist.
Okay.
So there's a line that originally mentioned Jews, Bolsheviks, and pagans. And he replaced that with Pharisees, Bolsheviks, and pagans.
Why did he do that?
Well, he explains that he made that change out of condescension to the common reader.
Okay.
And to avoid any potential incitement to ethnic disdain.
So he was aware of the potential for anti-Semitism?
Right, exactly.
And he took steps to try to mitigate that risk.
He did. He really wanted to prevent the Akathist from being used to promote hatred or prejudice.
Yeah. He didn't want to contribute to that.
Even if it meant changing the text.
Yeah, which raises questions.
Yeah, it does. It raises a lot of questions.
About how far a translator should go.
Right. Like how much can you change?
Exactly. Where do you draw the line?
Right.
Between fidelity to the original and the potential for harm.
Tough questions, and I don't think there are easy answers.
No, not at all.
But it makes you think about these translated texts.
It does. You can't just assume that a translation is a completely neutral representation of the original.
Right. You have to think about the translator's choices.
The translator's choices, their interpretations, their biases even.
Right, exactly. So this Akathist... It's a lot more than just a religious text, right?
It is.
It's a window into this whole worldview.
A whole set of beliefs.
Yeah.
Anxieties. And these are things that still resonate with people today.
They do, for sure.
Right.
And it raises those uncomfortable questions. Yeah, about faith,
politics,
historical
myth.
myth.
Yeah, how do we reconcile these things?
Right, how do you reconcile the veneration of someone like Codreanu, who espoused these really controversial ideologies with the teachings of Christianity?
With love, compassion, forgiveness.
Right, those core values.
Exactly.
And that's something that we're going to explore a little bit more.
Yeah, we're going to delve into that.
In our final part.
In the final part of our deep dive.
So join us.
As we continue to unravel the layers of this fascinating and complex Akathist.
Okay, see you next time.
All right, see you then.
Welcome back to our deep dive into this Akathist to Cornelius Codreanu.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. We've talked about the Akathist structure, the language,
the translator's commentary,
the translator's choices, even the motivations behind it.
All those layers.
All those layers. But now I kind of want to get your take on the bigger picture.
Okay.
What are the implications?
Yeah, the broader implications
of this Akathist and what it's trying to tell us?
Well, it's clear this isn't just some religious text, right? It's like a window into a certain worldview, a lens through which some people see the world.
Yeah.
And that worldview seems to be centered on this belief that traditional values are under attack.
Right.
That faith and nation are facing threats.
Right, like existential threats.
Existential threats, exactly.
Yeah, we're under siege.
Exactly, a siege mentality, and they need someone to lead the resistance.
And that brings us back to Codreanu and why he's still so appealing to some.
Yeah, why does his narrative still resonate?
Even if people don't agree with everything he did.
Right, even if they reject the more extreme parts.
Is it just a desire for strong leadership?
Maybe. I think people crave certainty.
Especially in uncertain times.
Exactly. They want clear-cut answers.
Right, like good versus evil.
That kind of simplicity.
Yeah, a simpler time.
And Codreanu seems to offer that.
He represents those traditional values.
He's unwavering, uncompromising.
But that's where it gets complicated.
Right. It does, because how do we reconcile that with Christianity?
Yeah, a religion based on love and compassion.
Forgiveness, turning the other cheek.
Right, and the Akathist kind of struggles with that too.
It does. It portrays Codreanu as this devout Christian.
Right, a man of faith.
But it also celebrates his role as a fighter.
Right, someone who battled against enemies.
Heroes of the faith, of the nation.
So it's blurring those lines.
It is, between faith and ideology.
And that raises some tough questions.
It does. Can we really separate someone's spiritual life from their political actions?
Especially when those actions had consequences.
Real-world consequences, yeah.
Right, and it makes you think about our responsibility.
As individuals, as a society.
To really examine these narratives.
Especially the ones that celebrate violence.
Right, or promote hatred.
We can't just ignore them.
No, because these beliefs, these anxieties about cultural change.
They resonate with a lot of people.
More than we might realize.
It's more widespread than we think.
So we need to engage with these ideas.
We need to understand them.
Understand their appeal and challenge them.
Challenge them when necessary.
Right, because ignoring them won't make them go away.
No, we need open and honest conversations.
About history, about blind devotion.
About critical thinking.
And the Akathist itself actually gives us a chance to do that.
It does. It's a primary source.
Right. It shows us how these people think.
Their motivations, their beliefs.
And it reminds us that history is complicated.
It's messy. It's full of contradictions.
And figures like Codreanu.
They defy easy categorization.
Right. They're not just heroes or villains.
They're complex individuals.
With flaws and contradictions.
Just like all of us.
Exactly. And acknowledging that complexity is important.
It is. It's crucial for understanding the past.
And how it shapes the present.
And the Akathist is a reminder that these narratives about the past...
They're not fixed. They're constantly evolving.
They're reshaped, reinterpreted.
To fit the needs of the present.
Exactly. And this Akathist to Codreanu...
It's a perfect example of that.
It's a carefully constructed narrative.
So as we finish our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions.
Question the narrative.
Examine the evidence.
Consider other perspectives.
Right, because that's how we learn.
That's how we grow.
That's how we build a better understanding of the world.
Well said. Critical thinking is essential.
It is. It's not about tearing things down.
It's about building something better.
More informed, more compassionate.
More just.
This has been a truly enlightening conversation.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.